We are all born. When we're born, we are born into a family, and we are given a name, an identity. When we are born, we have parents, we have a mother and a father, and with them, our lineage is traced. I, like everyone else, was born into a family. I had a mother and a father. My mother, her parents were good parents, and you can trace her lineage all the way back to the very beginning roots of Canada. My grandpa traced the family name all the way back to the very first colonies, French colonies in Canada of New France and Acadia, and traces the family all the way back to France. My grandpa was a war hero in World War II. He fought in Normandy on D-Day. When he died, I was at his funeral. I carried his war medals in a procession that went through the streets. My dad's family is a little bit different than that, though. The name that I was born with, my last name, is not my family. I have no blood to it, no tie to it. It's the name of an abandoned stepchild. My dad, my father, was himself a fatherless son. Him and his brothers. And if you trace back through his family line, a pattern emerges. A pattern of men abandoning their families. A pattern that my father, my dad, broke by being a father to me and my sisters. My dad and his brothers were adopted by a man named Bruce. He married my grandma and gave them his name. Then he had 2 more children with my grandma. And then he left my grandma. My dad's family probably would be more likely categorized as a matriarchy compared to my mom's family, which was certainly a patriarchy with this very strong masculine figure, war hero of a grandpa or a father figure. In my dad's family, there was nothing like this. I had 2 great-grandmas and a grandma. There was no grandpas. Now, my dad was born into a family with 2 parents. He was adopted by Bruce, but his real parents were my grandma, Faye, and her husband, Bill Wadsworth. And my dad and his brothers were born Wadsworth. My grandma Faye, was born into a family of good parents who were there for her. My grandma and Grandpa Hinchin. I got to meet my grandma Hinchin a lot. My grandpa Hinchin died when I was very young, so I don't have any memory of him. But he was there for my grandma. He was there for my dad and his brothers. He was a good man for his family, my Grandpa Hinchin, and he came up from the United States as well. He was from Illinois, and he had 9 brothers out there in Illinois. Taking what's mine, and ain't nobody stopping it. A lot of the history of the family and who was who and what was kind of hidden from my dad. He didn't know, him and his brothers weren't really aware of who they were and where they came from. They did know who their real dad was, but their dad, he wouldn't have anything to do with them. Every time that my dad would see his dad would walk away. If my dad tried to talk to him, his dad would leave. his dad wanted nothing to do with them, and he made that known. To me, how my dad was treated by his dad seems very strange to me and very wrong. I don't think that he should have done that. And when I found out that they all knew where he was, I was like, you guys know where he is and where he lives, and all my life I've never met him? I am going to meet him. Someone's going to tell me where he is, and I'm going to find him, and I'm going to go and talk to this guy and see what's what. And then around that time that I found out that, he died. Now my real dad's name was Bill Wadsworth. And to try and understand how Bill Wadsworth could be this way to his children and abandon them and not want to talk to them, not support them, and he told their mother to put them up for adoption and get rid of them because he wanted nothing to do with them, and he lived that way towards them. That to me seems pretty shocking. But if you look at Bill Wadsworth's history, you'll see that a pattern emerges that may have led him to be like that. Now, Bill Wadsworth, it turns out, himself was not born with the name Wadsworth. Bill Wadsworth was born Bill Morkey. So he too lost his name and his family identity, just like my dad did. There is a pattern of behavior, a pattern of fatherless sons. Bill Wadsworth was adopted by Ethel Wadsworth and George W. Wadsworth. Ethel Wadsworth was the cousin of Herbert Morkey. Herbert Morkey was the father of Bill Wadsworth. As we look into the life of Bill Wadsworth, we can see that his father, Herbert Morkey, is the link in the chain, so to speak, where the cycle began. Herbert Morkey's parents were Frank Morkey and Ida Schulz. Tracing back from them, their families seem to be there. Frank was there for Herbert and his brothers. So it turns out that the family name that was lost to us is Morkey. So as we look into these Morkeys that were lost to us, they weren't all lost to us because of Ethel Morkey, Ethel Wadsworth, who adopted Bill Wadsworth to keep him in the family. When Frank and Ewald Morkey came up with their wives and their children, they got land and they built houses. They had Model T Fords. The Morkeys and their wives came up from the United States into Canada. They came from the states of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, and Nebraska, and they kind of moved around in this region a bit. They moved up into Canada at that time on the rails. The Soo Line kind of connected this area to Canada, and they came up on the trains. And Bill Wadsworth was born in around the 1920s in Moose Jaw. In the 1920s, Moose Jaw was known as Little Chicago because Al Capone used it to smuggle alcohol. There were tunnels under the city of Moose Jaw that Al Capone used, and the Soo Line to transport the alcohol all the way back to Chicago and various stops along the way.
Money, pussy, power. 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 MPP. MPP. Money, pussy,
Bill Wadsworth, who was adopted by Ethel Wadsworth and George W. Wadsworth. George W. ended up in Moose Jaw somehow from Salem, New York, which is upstate New York, just east of Albany. Ethel Wadsworth, who was Ethel Morkey, when Herbert Morkey abandoned his family, Ethel stepped in because she didn't want Bill to be lost to the family, so she adopted him to keep him. But Herbert Morkey's wife, Mildred, had 2 children, so the second child, Roy, was given up to the government into social services. Eventually, Grandma Mildred got him back, but she was very poor at first when she was abandoned by her husband and lost the children. So that's why Bill had to be adopted, and he got the name Wadsworth because his father's cousin adopted him back into the family so he wouldn't be lost. So what we know about Herbert Morkey is a little bit, just some documents that were left behind that got shared with us all and that remain in the family. What we know about Herbert Morkey is that he grew up when he was younger. He would ride the rails, the trains, and go and play dances. All of the Morkeys were musicians. Herbert Morkey was a musician, and he would travel and play in bands and make music traveling on the rails. Then when he got older, he had children and a wife, and then he abandoned them and left. He ended up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and had a whole other family with another woman. I think they had a couple children, and then he died here, and that's where he's buried. Herbert and Ethel grew up together. They were the same age. They were cousins. Their fathers were brothers. And it seems like the Morkeys were a very close family. They spent a lot of time together. They made music. When they would get together for family gatherings, they would make music together and celebrate together. Ethel and George W. Wadsworth adopted Bill Wadsworth, and they had a daughter, Joan. So it turns out that George W. Wadsworth and Ethel Wadsworth were deemed by Immigration Canada to not be Canadian citizens, but American citizens. So Joan moved back to the United States and lived in California. To me, of all the people in the history of the family that seems important was Ethel Wadsworth in keeping the family together. She was a very important person to my dad personally and his brothers. She played a very important role. Even my mother met her. She was a very important lady in the family of what was the family. So it was a matriarchy. And she was a very... I never got to meet her. She died right before I was born. So I never got to meet her, but she is the most interesting person to me from the past because she did keep the family together. She was the kin keeper I couldn't find any identity in the name that we had. And as I look back through the family tree, I didn't see an identity that we could reclaim, that I could take as a name. But in a name comes an identity, and I felt that I needed an identity. I needed a name. I needed a family, a heritage tree. So I looked into the Bible and I saw the story of Jacob as he wrestled with an angel. He wrestled with an angel for a blessing. And when the angel finally blessed him, he gave him the name Israel, which is prevails with man and God. I took my first name and I made it my last name, and then I took on a new name, Israel, as my first name. Israel Phillips, as a blessing from God. And just like in the Bible, it says that we have been grafted into the family of God. We have been grafted into the tree through Christ Jesus. So too is my name like a blessing, grafting me into the family of God, into a brand new heritage, into a brand new family, into a brand new identity.
Memphis Disney, Memphis Disney, Memphis Disney, born to be free. Oh, I can be. Memphis Disney, Memphis Disney, Memphis Disney, born to be free. Oh, I can be. Look into my eyes as I visualize and see it materialize. Potential I realize. Watch the sun surprise like a bird when it first flies. It's my destiny. I can see it clearly coming up all around me. Something that before you couldn't see being born inside of me. On the rise from zero to hero. Got the evidence to show. Not gonna tiptoe. Keep it on the go.